Welcome to Creepypasta. Please like, share and subscribe. This will help us make more content for you. Thank you. Watching my own death and then escaping it years later. When I was 17, I was in choir class. We were all standing on the risers going through our warm-ups, when suddenly I was transported to a sterile room and I couldn't move. I was in labor and I felt everything. I felt tearing as I was told to push, and soon I felt the child leave me, no crying. I briefly saw him as they took him away, still I couldn't move. I was so tired and I faintly heard something about hemorrhaging, and the last thing I heard, my machine flatline. The next place I transported to was different. This time I was a part of the air, and I was watching a man and his son eating cereal, very sad, and the boy said he missed me. I knew then that the child was too old to be mine, and yet still he was mine. And just like that, I was back in choir doing our warm-ups, only now I was crying silently and shaking. I told my best friend at the time and she brushed it off. Fast forward several years, and I meet this guy and I immediately recognize him from the weird moment in choir. We start talking and hanging out. He's 13 years older than me and has a son 12 years younger than me, that he has 50% custody of. Well, we start dating and eventually end up doing some less than legal drug-related stuff, and we get busted. He somehow manages to convince these task force guys to write me down as innocent in their reports, and we bailed my boyfriend out. The court date was set for a year later, and in that time I got pregnant. Had he not taken that hit for me, I would have gone to prison and given birth in prison. The craziest part of all this, is towards the end of my pregnancy I found out that in my state, when inmates give birth, they are strapped to a table and aren't allowed to touch the infant because they are considered a threat to the child. I also had to have an emergency C-section. So that is the story of how I cheated death of me and my sons, thanks to his father. And an important side note, his son, my soon-to-be stepson, has grown to look identical to the boy in the vision. Edit, I would also like to add that we are both completely sober and an entirely happy family.
Several people saw and spoke to my father, but he was already dead years ago. My father was a very friendly person. He had tons of friends. It was hard to keep record of who he spoke to. He also traveled a lot due to his work. He was also very strong and had no severe health issues. However, when I was 10 he died. It was sudden. We informed as many people as we could. One day, an old colleague of my father ran into my mom. She hardly recognized him. They spoke and he said, "I met your husband just a few weeks ago." It was already 2 years since my father's death, and he didn't know my father was dead because he was away for years, and had only come to visit his mom. He also said that they had a long conversation and also ended up having coffee together. This happened again, this time with one of my mom's old student in his late 20s. He used to be a child, when he used to come over to my house to get tutored. My mother used to help him in math and English. My father used to give him snacks after he studied, and play with him. He too didn't know my father was already dead, and told my mom how he met my father about a month ago and they spoke for a really long time. This happened like 2 other times, and then all quiet. It hasn't happened in a long time.
Comments. I had a similar thing happen with my neighbor who I knew very well. When standing at our kitchen sink, you could see his entire backyard through the window. One day, I was washing dishes at the sink and saw him in his yard, checking his flower garden, and thought nothing of it. I waved at him through the window at some point. When he looked up, he saw me and he waved back, just like normal. At this time, we had lived next door to each other for about 15 years. The next day, there were 2 people taking stuff out of his house. I asked them what was going on. They told me that my neighbor had died the week before. He had no children and his wife had passed several years previously. The people were his wife's nephews come to clean out the house. I guess he was just saying goodbye.
I believe it. It happened to my cousin that was living with us. He had a heart disease that kept getting worse. He was rushed one night to the hospital and sadly died the day after, a Tuesday. He was only 30. Wednesday, the day after his death, my mother went to the market and my cousin, who was a friendly guy, had many friends there among the sellers. So my mother thought it was good to tell them that my cousin passed away. When she arrived and told them, They said, "No way, because Albert, my cousin, was there just before and has left minutes before my mother came." They said he was normal and chatted with all of them like usual. I believe it. It happened to my cousin that was living with us. He had a heart disease that kept getting worse. He was rushed one night to the hospital and sadly died the day after, a Tuesday. He was only 30. Wednesday, the day after his death, my mother went to the market. My cousin, who was a friendly guy, had many friends there among the sellers. So my mother thought it was good to tell them that he passed away. When she arrived and told them, they said, "No way, because Albert, my cousin, was there just before, and has left minutes before my mother came." They said he was normal and chatted with all of them like usual. He told them that he was a little sick from malaria, but nothing serious. Otherwise he was like a normal individual, as solid as you and me. They were all dumbfounded. There were many witnesses, as it was an open and crowded market and everybody in the place saw him. Few months later, another person reported seeing him. I heard similar stories many times. The common denominator is that the people interacting with the defunct don't know about his or her death. In some other timeline, I died in a horrific car crash. I've told this story to a few people in my social circle, but they always look at me funny. I recently discovered this subreddit and knew it needed to be told here. A few years ago I was in a hurry to a very important meeting and missed my turn. I got in a turning lane to make a U-turn when my GPS corrected itself and told me just to go straight. So here's where I did something stupid that I'm convinced killed me. There's a double turning lane that has a red light, while the straight lanes to the right have a green light. I was stopped in the inner turning lane, so I had to cross another turning lane to get into the lane that was straight. I signal that I need to get out and a car lets me into the other turning lane. It was a tight squeeze at a weird angle, so I had no visibility of oncoming traffic. I'm so panicked that I'm late, and pissed off that I just said, "Screw it," and pressed the gas. In that moment I had a prolonged blink accompanied by a sudden shift in pressure. I felt a pop in my head, like you get when you're on an airplane. Suddenly my foot's not on the gas, and I'm back in the turning lane. I look at the lane I was supposed to be turning into, and as I do, a vehicle going at least 60 miles per hour speeds past me, trying to beat the yellow light. Had I driven forward I would have been dust. Unlike a lot of these stories, I didn't experience my own death, but I know for a fact I drove forward. I actually remember driving forward. Yet, here I was safely back in my lane. Alive. I don't remember the name of a theory, but a while back I read about an abstract idea that our souls will never let us die. That it will choose the path of least resistance, even if that means jumping to an alternate timeline. I wonder if I was glitched into a timeline where I had acted more cautiously. I think about my glitch from time to time, and get a little down, imagining an alternate timeline where my wife had to move on from a life she built around me, and how devastated my parents must have been when they got the news. I hug them a little tighter nowadays.
Comments. Quantum immortality. Have you noticed anything different since the crash?
Opie. This may sound weird, but I swear Childish Gambino wasn't as popular. Other than that, there have been 1 or 2 times someone was recalling a funny moment about a past party, or something that I didn't go to, but in their story, I was a part of it. Or they quote me on something I've never said. I really don't read too much into it, though. I think that when people tell anecdotes there isn't much focus on accurate details. I also found a Facebook message I sent a while back to an old soccer friend, where I was reminiscing about a coach we had for one season, down to his name and where he was from. I seriously have no memory of this coach today. Died on the corner. Just started looking through this subreddit and just had to share my story. About 4 or 5 years ago I worked at a Little Caesars Pizza. Usually I would work inside on the pizzas, but we had just started up this Monday Madness deal where pizzas were only $4 on Monday, so we needed someone to advertise. I was a wild and weird metalhead, so I took up the position on Mondays of just going out there, throwing around a sign to get attention, and bring people in for pizza. Not exactly glamorous, but I had fun. One day while I was out there doing my thing, I see a van coming straight at me. It jumps the curb and slams into me, and I feel it crush me against the electrical box controlling the street lights. I see a quick flash as the traffic lights flick off, then black out. I gasp and I'm still on the corner and nothing has happened. No van or anything. Well, I was a little shaken up, so I decide to pack it up and walk back to the store for a break. I walk no more than 15 feet away from the corner when I hear a crash. I look back and a van just hopped the curb into the electrical box, and I watch the traffic lights flick off. Needless to say, I took the day off. Still think about that from time to time. Comments. Dude, you just respawned from your previous checkpoint. Do you have a creepy story? Please share it with us in the comments and we will post it on the channel. Please subscribe. Thank you.